Thank you for tuning in to the Wellbe podcast. This is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith. I'm a board-certified holistic patient advocate, and my goal with this podcast and all my other work with Wellbe, which you can check out at getwellbe.com, is to empower you in your health, helping you avoid chronic symptoms and diseases, and when they do come up, help you heal them as naturally and holistically as possible. Next week, I'm sharing a big announcement, so definitely tune in to the episode to hear some exciting news. Today, I share with you an investigative guide into a topic you may not even realize is a symptom you're experiencing. We're all familiar with feeling out of it sometimes. It's part of being a person, especially in our distraction-filled, fast-paced digital world. But sometimes that feeling persists, settling in our minds and making it hard for us to accomplish anything at all. Yes, brain fog is very real and very unpleasant, and unfortunately, a little tricky to get to the root of. So in this episode, you'll learn the definition of brain fog, what causes it, plus brain fog treatments and natural remedies that are sure to help brain fog go away. Before we jump in, if you like the Wellbe podcast and you haven't yet left a review or subscribed to it, please do so now. You don't even have to stop listening to this episode. Just scroll all the way down on the Wellbe podcast page in your app and click Write a Review. Give us hopefully 5 stars and a few words, and then press Submit in the top right-hand corner, and boom, you're done. All right, now let's get into what we're talking about when we say brain fog. We all have moments where our minds wander and we fall into a daze, or we get lost scrolling through our phones and forget why we picked up the dang thing in the first place. That's not brain fog. That's being a person in 2021. The definition of brain fog is slippery because brain fog itself isn't actually a condition. Rather, it's a term used to describe a set of symptoms that are caused by any number of different factors or medical conditions. Someone experiencing brain fog may feel some or all of the following symptoms: difficulty concentrating, not being able to think clearly / having fuzzy thinking, memory lapses or forgetfulness, inability to focus on any one thing, not feeling like yourself, fatigue / tiredness. To be honest, the real definition of brain fog is contained in the name itself. Your brain feels foggy. It's a pretty simple phenomenon to understand, but understanding why it's happening and how to fix it, that's a bit trickier. So what causes it? As I explained, brain fog is not a condition itself, but rather a cluster of symptoms that can be caused by a variety of different things. Meaning there's no single answer to what causes brain fog, but rather a whole list of potential causes. The bad news is that list is long. The good news is that there is a list, and if you do some reflecting on your lifestyle and other symptoms, you should be able to pinpoint where your root cause lies. So if you're experiencing brain fog, chances are that one of these is the culprit. Number 1, inflammation. So this one really isn't a standalone because it's always caused by something else, much like brain fog itself. But because it's such a biggie when it comes to brain function, I wanted to give it its own space. Researchers have long suspected that there's a link between inflammation and cognitive function, and an abundance of studies have supported this belief, including multiple studies linking inflammation to cognitive diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's. One recent study looked at brain activity in subjects experiencing inflammation compared with those who weren't, and found that the inflammation specifically impacted the part of the brain responsible for staying alert. This means that when you're experiencing inflammation, it's much harder to remain mentally engaged, leading to brain fog. Inflammation can be caused by many different things, several of which I'll dive into now. But you can also check out our deep dive on inflammation on getwellbe.com, or we have a podcast version of it as well. Just search GetWellbe and inflammation in your podcast app, and hopefully you'll get right to the episode. All right, now let's get into the root causes of inflammation in the brain. Number 1, as you could probably imagine, diet. If you have any food allergies or sensitivities that you don't know about, you could inadvertently be triggering an inflammatory response when you eat them. This inflammation, in turn, can lead to the brain fog I explained before. Diet can also come into play if you have vitamin deficiencies, especially a vitamin B12 deficiency, which is essential for healthy brain and nervous system function. Vegetarians and older people are at a higher risk for vitamin B12 deficiencies, since most food-based B12 is found in meat, eggs, and dairy products, and because it gets harder to absorb B12 as you age. A vitamin D deficiency could also be the problem, since decreased levels of the vitamin are associated with impaired cognitive function. Next up, we have poor sleep. It's not breaking news that if you're sleep deprived, it's difficult to focus. But even if you think you're getting enough sleep in terms of quantity, the quality of your sleep could be behind your brain fog. For instance, if you're exposed to blue light close to bedtime, i.e. you're scrolling on your phone before you turn the light out, you might not be getting enough REM sleep, which is essential for consolidating and processing memories. You may also have a sleep disorder like sleep apnea, which prevents you from properly resting even if you think you're out for a full 8 hours. Timing also matters, since your brain and body detoxify the most between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So if you're awake during some or all of this time, your brain isn't getting as much time as it needs to detoxify. Next up, we have stress. Chronic stress has been consistently linked to poor cognitive function over the long term. This could be for a few different reasons, including that stress triggers inflammation and disrupts your sleep. Stress also puts your body into fight or flight mode, releasing the hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which tell your body to put all its energy toward the perceived threat, i.e. you're being chased by a tiger, and shut down other functions like thinking clearly. This makes you unable to focus in the short term and can leave you mentally exhausted in the long term. Next up, we have hormonal changes. Sex hormones regulate the brain in a variety of different ways, and studies show that changes in levels of estrogen, progesterone, FSH, or luteinizing hormones can also impact your brain function. Most of the research here is centered around menopause, when women experience a huge drop in estrogen. One study found that 60% of menopausal women have difficulty concentrating, while another study showed that women have difficulty focusing, recalling words, and remembering things in the period immediately before and during menopause. Of course, hormonal changes can happen at many other moments in life, like during pregnancy or if you take the birth control pill or come off the birth control pill. Next up, we have heavy metal toxicity and pollution. So various pollutants and toxins in the environment can lead to brain fog. Air pollution can cause brain inflammation, and research shows that chronic exposure to traffic-related pollution can increase the risk of neurological disorders, and that even short-term exposure to these pollutants can lower the academic performance of school children. Long-term exposure to heavy metals like lead, arsenic, mercury, and aluminum can also lead to neurological issues like brain fog. Since these metals bioaccumulate, it means that lifetime exposure matters. So even a little bit here and there can really add up by the time you're elderly or even just middle-aged. Mold toxins can also accumulate in the body and can lead to brain fog in some people. Only about 25% of the population is susceptible to mold toxicity, so even if nobody else in your household is experiencing symptoms, you might have a mold issue in your home. Next, we have certain medications. A class of medicine called anticholinergics, I think I said that right, could also be behind brain fog. These drugs block the effects of a neurotransmitter that's responsible for activity in the brain, resulting in confusion and mental fuzziness. A whole bunch of different medications fall under the anticholinergic umbrella, including drugs used to treat COPD, depression, and overactive bladder, as well as Benadryl and other allergy medications that contain diphenhydramine. And it probably goes without saying that any medication that has a sedative effect, i.e. makes you drowsy or knocks you out, can make it more difficult to think straight. So all of the lifestyle and environmental factors that I just mentioned could be contributing to or causing brain fog. But if you've considered all of these potential sources and crossed them off your list, the issue may actually be a different underlying condition. Brain fog can be a symptom of different conditions, many of which can go undiagnosed for quite a long time. If you're experiencing brain fog and can't seem to figure out why, you might be unknowingly dealing with one of these. The first is stealth infections caused by microbes like fungus and bad bacteria and viruses. One of the most famous at this point is COVID-19. I'm not trying to freak you out, but it's worth mentioning that some people who contract COVID-19 report feeling fuzzy-headed and unable to think clearly, both while they have the virus actively and in the recovery period afterward. Recently, scientists were able to pinpoint exactly why that happens by looking at autopsies of people who had died from COVID. They found cells which normally only live in bone marrow in the brain capillaries of these patients. These cells are far larger than the type of cells found in a healthy brain, and so as one researcher put it, Finding these kinds of cells in these tubes is like finding a football stuffed into a really small pipe in your house. Nothing is going to go through. The next famous bacteria-induced disease is Lyme disease. People with Lyme, and specifically more with chronic Lyme, commonly report poor memory, slower thinking, and difficulty recalling words. This is likely because it's an inflammatory disease, and when Lyme pathogens cross the blood-brain barrier, inflammation occurs in the central nervous system, where the brain lives. A study from Johns Hopkins that looked at brain scans of people with chronic Lyme disease found that they all had a chemical marker for brain inflammation as compared with a control group that did not have that marker. Next, we have SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Many people with SIBO also report having brain fog, and research has consistently shown a link between the two. This is likely because SIBO means you have too much bacteria, both good and bad, in your small intestines. And these bacteria produce the chemical histamine in order to break down food. But since there's too much bacteria, there's also too much histamine, and excess histamine in the gut means excess histamine in the brain, where it can also lead to brain fog. Next, we have a variety of autoimmune conditions. Autoimmune conditions can be partially caused by genetics or lifestyle factors or environmental factors, or a combination of all of them. Celiac disease is one, a food intolerance that can cause inflammation that leads to brain fog. Celiac disease is an extreme example with some additional factors that can lead to cognitive impairment. First, there's the chronic inflammation from your body attacking healthy cells, and then there's the fact that celiac disease damages the gut and when left untreated can make it impossible for a person to absorb nutrients. This in turn leads to micronutrient deficiency, depleting the brain of vital compounds it needs to function correctly. Then we have anemia. As I said before, being deficient in vitamin B12 can lead to brain fog. But if you're really deficient, you could also develop anemia, a condition where you don't have enough red blood cells. Anemia is associated with low iron levels since 70% of the body's iron is found in red blood cells. And low iron can cause symptoms like fatigue, depression, and brain fog. Then the famous diabetes. If you have untreated diabetes, then your insulin levels are really out of whack. This matters for your brain because insulin regulates blood sugar, and blood sugar is your brain's primary source of fuel. So not enough blood sugar means your brain has no fuel. Too much blood sugar, on the other hand, can increase serotonin and neurotransmitters in the brain. And while these neurotransmitters normally have a positive effect on brain function, too much can have the opposite effect, i.e. a negative effect. Then we have hypothyroidism. This is when your thyroid gland is underactive. It doesn't produce enough thyroid hormones. Two of these hormones, T4 and T3, are critical to many body functions, including brain function. So when these hormone levels drop, they can make your brain more sluggish. Next, we have another autoimmune condition called lupus, where your immune system attacks your bones, joints, and internal organs. And lupus fog is a common symptom of it. Though it's tough to pin down exactly why this cognitive impairment happens, it's likely a side effect of the fatigue, stress, and depression that accompanies dealing with the disease. In rare cases, lupus can actually do damage to brain cells, which leads directly to difficulty thinking. Another autoimmune condition is multiple sclerosis, or MS. More than half of the people who have MS will develop cognitive issues because MS affects the nervous system, preventing your brain from sending information to the rest of your body the way it normally does. This can lead to difficulty concentrating, focusing, or even speaking. Next, we have chronic fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue is a poorly understood condition that causes severe ongoing fatigue. The name itself should be a red flag because it's obviously not addressing the root cause, right? There's something causing chronic fatigue. But chronic fatigue syndrome can negatively impact the brain's ability to function. Researchers at Stanford recently found that people diagnosed with CFS had reduced levels of a certain type of brain activity called peak alpha frequency, which is associated with cognitive performance. The study also found that CFS patients have excessive delta waves, which are typically associated with sleep, while they're awake. This means that their brain is almost literally half asleep and is functioning at a reduced speed. Lastly, we have fibromyalgia. This is another poorly understood condition, which literally means phantom pain everywhere. Fibromyalgia is a disorder characterized by widespread musculoskeletal pain accompanied by fatigue, sleep, memory, and mood issues. Researchers believe that fibromyalgia amplifies painful sensations by affecting the way your brain and spinal cord process signals. Since brain function is compromised, it's no surprise that fibro fog is one of the primary symptoms. With almost all of these conditions, whether they're being caused by an autoimmune condition or a stealth infection, what's happening is inflammation is occurring in the body as it reacts to maybe a viral attack or an attack from your own body and creates an inflammatory response. So really, we started with inflammation, and I should say we end with inflammation. So now the task is understanding what is causing your inflammation and then trying to pinpoint what you can do to reduce brain fog. All right, so are there any natural treatments to treat it? Just as what causes brain fog has a lot of different potential answers, there are also a lot of different potential remedies. Ultimately, the treatment that will work for you depends on the root cause that you're addressing, as I just mentioned, which means there's no single approach that will work for everyone. If you're struggling with brain fog and you don't know why, the best first step is to find an integrative healthcare practitioner or a doctor who can do proper testing on you. By looking at various tests, including blood, urine, saliva, and even stool tests, and listening to all of your symptoms, the practitioner can determine if you have an underlying condition, an infection, nutritional deficiencies, or any other abnormal levels that indicate what's amiss. Once you know what's going on, it'll be easier to narrow down what you should do next. But if you've seen someone and are still unsure why you're experiencing brain fog, chances are it is something to do with chronic inflammation, as I said, whether that's caused by heavy metals, a bacterial infection, your diet, etc. The good news is that there are a number of lifestyle-related changes you can make that will help to reduce chronic inflammation no matter what the actual root cause is, and therefore may reduce or eliminate it. What's great is that these remedies for brain fog are free of any side effects and are healthy choices for anybody, regardless of whether or not you're experiencing fuzzy thinking. So here are a few you can try. First, eat well. This will solve almost every problem. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times on this podcast, and I'll say it again. What you put in your mouth is your first line of defense against any chronic health issue. I can't overstate how important diet is to your body's ability to function. And this includes your brain. It's a muscle after all. Eat mostly whole foods. Avoid inflammatory items like processed foods and sugar as much as possible. And make sure to get in lots of healthy fats, omega-3 fatty acids, and anti-inflammatory foods to fuel your brain. When in doubt, eat a lot of green plants. Next, get enough sleep and make sure it's high-quality sleep. Make sure you arrange your schedule so that you can get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And we have a great interview with a sleep expert that you should definitely check out on getwellbe.com that talks about your circadian rhythm, how to make sure you fall asleep, stay asleep, the things during the day you can do that affect your sleep, and much more. Next, manage your stress. If you're feeling chronically stressed, take steps to manage and reduce stress in your life. This might mean removing some of the stressful elements, prioritizing self-care, incorporating a mindfulness or meditation practice, or all of these things. Next, exercise regularly. Staying active has been associated with sharper mental acuity and better memory. That's because exercise releases cytokines, which are chemical messengers, and endorphins, the happy-making hormone, both of which rejuvenate the brain. Next, take the right supplements. Most of us should be taking a vitamin D supplement anyway. We have a great guide on vitamin D on getwellbe.com. You should also check out if you're not sure if you're vitamin D deficient or what supplement you should be getting and how to get vitamin D. In our guide, you'll find a lot of research that supports an association between vitamin D deficiency and brain function. Add a B complex vitamin to the mix as well to make sure you're not deficient in B12. And for a full list of WellBe approved supplements, you can check out the WellBe non-toxic product database in the natural medicine section at getwellbe.com/store, where we've provided a ton of practitioner-grade supplement recommendations from WellBe experts and from our own research with various third-party certifications and rankings. Next, do an elimination diet. If you think a food sensitivity might be causing your brain fog, try an elimination diet where you can cut out common food allergens like gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, etc., and vices like alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes, etc. Then slowly reintroduce these items into your diet, noticing how you feel after you introduce each one. You may find that one or more of these food groups are causing you chronic inflammation and contributing to your brain fog. Next, try intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting has a ton of benefits. We have a great interview with intermittent fasting expert Dr. Amy Shah that you can also check out on the Wellbe podcast or on getwellbe.com. And one of those benefits is improved brain function. Multiple studies have found that regularly practicing intermittent fasting boosts cognitive performance. Lastly, invest in a high-quality air filter. If you think air pollution might be a contributing factor to your brain fog, get a high-quality air filter or air purifier for your home. While you can't control the quality of the air outside your home, you spend the majority of your time in your house, so this should make a difference. We have another deep dive into air filters and air purifiers, but you can also check out all of our Wellbe approved air filters with the proper specifications in the Wellbe non-toxic product database that I just mentioned, which you can find at getwellbe.com/store. While not all of these remedies for brain fog will work for every person, because everybody's underlying issue is unique and everybody's body is so different, all of them are best practices for keeping a healthy mind and body in general. If you implement any of the strategies I just mentioned and are still struggling with brain fog, seek out an integrative or functional doctor or practitioner to get to the root cause. All right, so the Wellbe takeaway is brain fog is, well, a fuzzy issue. The term gets thrown around a lot, and I suspect there are a lot of people walking around who just think they're not smart or getting older when in fact they actually have brain fog. And there's not a lot of clarity around what it means or what causes it and how to deal with it. So here's what to remember. Brain fog is not a medical condition itself. It's rather a set of symptoms caused by something else. Because of this, the definition is limited to the symptoms it causes, which includes difficulty concentrating or thinking clearly, memory lapses, and an inability to focus. Next, there are a number of lifestyle and environmental factors that could be causing brain fog. These include inflammation. As we mentioned, inflammation is really the source of all the rest I'm about to mention, which include diet, poor sleep, stress, stealth infections, certain medications, heavy metal toxicity and pollution, and hormonal changes. Sometimes an underlying condition is the cause of brain fog. Conditions that cause brain fog include COVID-19, celiac disease, Lyme disease, diabetes, anemia, lupus, multiple sclerosis, hypothyroidism, SIBO, chronic fatigue syndrome, and fibromyalgia. Remember that most of the conditions I just mentioned have the same lifestyle and environment-based root causes and contributing factors that I talked about before. Now, if you're dealing with brain fog, it's best to figure out the underlying cause before you settle on a treatment. Often the first step is to see an integrative practitioner or doctor who can listen to your symptoms and do blood work. They can test to see if you have any nutritional deficiencies, if your other levels are off in any way, or if there's some underlying condition like Lyme disease. If your labs don't show anything or you can't see an integrative health professional, there are various lifestyle changes you can make on your own that may clear it up. Which one works for you will depend on the original cause, but each of these strategies is also great for health overall. Natural remedies include eating a healthy, whole food-based diet, getting enough good quality sleep, managing your stress, exercising regularly, trying intermittent fasting, taking vitamin B12 and vitamin D supplements, doing an elimination diet to suss out any food sensitivities and diet-based causes of inflammation, and installing an air filter or air purifier in your home. Have you ever struggled with brain fog? How did you figure out the root cause and what did you do to treat it? Share your experience in the comments on the article version of this episode on getwellbe.com, and you'll find a link to that in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I really want to know. And also, while you're there, become a Wellbe Insider so that you can get all of our latest content, big announcements, special offers, and personal notes I don't share anywhere else weekly in your inbox. Plus, you'll get a free copy of my audio guide on how to feel the best you've ever felt and heal anything. The 10 things you need to optimize your health and heal any health issue, big or small, naturally. Even if you're the healthiest person out there, it's definitely worth a listen. I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Wellbe Podcast. And don't forget, I'll be sharing a big, exciting announcement, so please tune in. And if you haven't already and found this episode helpful or interesting, subscribe to the podcast. This way you'll never miss a new episode and they'll be delivered to you whenever we publish a new one. And please share this episode with family or friends who you think might find it valuable and informative. It means a lot and helps more people find the podcast. If you already have, then thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Once again, this is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith, and thanks for listening to the Wellbe Podcast.